Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be canning dill pickles in my Nesco canner. I'm Rebecca from stockingmypantry.com. Okay, so before I get into this, I want to say my original intent today was to make and can dill pickle relish. However, last night I got these cucumbers, which they actually look quite nice. They're mini cucumbers. I got them from we get groceries delivered, and I got them and I was happy with them. When I was going over the ingredient list for the recipe, I realized that I don't have turmeric. And so one thing is, I always want to can things as soon as possible after I get them, whether it's I pick them or I buy them from the store. The fresher the better, right? So I didn't really want to go out and buy turmeric. And so I kind of dug through my different canning books to find out what I could do with the dill pickles, with these cucumbers, with the ingredients that I had on hand. And I ended up finding a recipe in this DIY pickling book and for dill pickles, and it says quick dill pickles. Now, at first I thought that meant quick as in you don't can them, you just put them in the refrigerator. But the description for the recipe kind of gives some insight into it, and it says, quite possibly one of the easiest canned dill pickle recipes around. These cucumbers require no brining and are ready to go into the jar for pickling in a flash. Okay, so that sounded good. So I looked at the ingredient list, and I'll read that to you, and I'm going to make a slight variation on it. But anyway, it's 5 1/4 pounds of pickling cucumbers. I only have 4 pounds. 1 tablespoon black peppercorns, 8 dill heads. I do not have dill heads. The other recipe called for dill seed, and just in the research that I've done, it's totally fine to substitute dill seed for fresh dill in pickling recipes, or any kind of canning recipe. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be using instead of the fresh dill heads. 1/4 cup minced garlic cloves, and I have some of this minced garlic that I'm going to use. 5 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of pickling salt, which I have here. 3 1/4 cups of white vinegar or apple cider vinegar. I have white vinegar. You can use apple cider vinegar, but from what I've read, most people choose white because the apple cider vinegar kind of discolors the pickles. So just keep that in mind. And 4 cups of water, which I have in a pot. Okay, so anyway, that's basically for the brine, which I'll get into this recipe step by step. Now, the only other thing is it does not call for, but I'm going to be using some Pickle Crisp, and looking at the instructions on the jar for pints, which I'm going to be doing a rounded 1/8 of a teaspoon per pint. Okay, so that's not in the recipe, but I'm going to use it. This is my first time canning pickles. I'm hoping they're going to be crisp, or at least reasonably crisp. Okay, so that's what I've got. Okay, so now let's go through the instructions. Wash the cucumbers and remove the blossom end, half, quarter, or leave cucumbers whole, depending on their size. Okay, so I haven't done that yet. I'm going to be doing it now. And one thing I want to mention too is I already have my jars and my water heated in my Nesco. Okay, so that is ready to go. All right, so wash the cucumbers and remove the blossom ends, half, quarter, or leave the cucumbers whole, depending on their size. Okay, so we're going to do that first. And so the first step is to remove the blossom end. Now I'm picking one that I'm hoping you'll be able to see. That's basically where the stem is. I'm going to actually cut off the end of each part, so no worries there. Now the problem is you can see that these are taller than my jars. Okay, so I got the idea I'm going to cut off both ends and then use the jar to kind of gauge how tall I want these to be. And I'm going right to the rim, right like that. And then these ends I'm going to slice and have 1 jar of sliced dill pickles. So that way this won't be wasted and yet these should fit nicely into the jar. I actually cut it a little bit more than I should have, but that's totally fine. Okay, so then I want these, since they're not huge, I'm debating about whether to do halves or to do spears. I think I'm going to do spears because they'll fit into the jar nicer. So I'm just going to cut them into spears. And I'm not going to put them into the jars yet because I want to keep the jars hot. I'm going to be steam canning this. And part of the guidelines for steam canning is to use hot water, hot jars, hot liquid. Okay, so I've got my jars and my water's hot. I want the jars to stay hot until I'm ready to fill them. So I'm just going to go ahead and prepare all of these cucumbers, and then I'll bring you back when I'm ready to fill the jars. And by the way, when I'm ready to fill the jars, I will put the spices in, and we'll go over that part as well. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so I'm back. I have the spears, cucumbers cut into spears, and I also ended up with quite a few slices, and part of the reason for that was that some of the cucumbers had some kind of soft spots on them. For the most part they were really nice, but if a soft spot was right in the middle, then I couldn't really make a spear with it, so I just sliced them and so on, which is fine because I kind of wanted to do both. So anyway, the next step in the process is I'm going to make the brine and then just set it aside with a lid on it so it'll stay hot, and then I'll pack the jars. So the brine is very simple. It calls for 4 cups of water, which I already have in here, and 3 3/4 cup of white vinegar, which I'm going to pour in now. And then it calls for 5 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of pickling salt, which I have here. Okay, and now I'm going to take it over to the stove, and I'm not going to bring it over there because there's not a whole lot to see, but basically I'm just going to bring it up to a simmer. The only point is to heat up the brine and to dissolve the salt. So that's what I'll be doing now, and then I'll come back and we'll pack the jars. Okay, so the brine is done. It's still on the stove. I just put a lid on it to keep it warm. Now I'm going to remove the hot jars from the canner, and I've measured the right amount of water, including what water I have in the jars, and so I'm just dumping the hot water back into the canner, because basically what I'm going for is 8 cups of water in the canner. And I'm going to leave 1 jar in there because I probably won't need it. And so I'll just leave it in there so it'll stay hot. Okay, now let's go ahead and put the spices into the jars. Okay, so it basically said to divide a tablespoon of black peppercorns evenly among the jars. And so I'm just going to, and that was for 5 pints. I'm just going to put in a sprinkling of each one, into each jar. The nice thing is with things like the spices, you don't have to be overly precise. I'll just put a little bit more. Some of it is a matter of taste. The thing that you don't want to vary is the brine, because you need to make sure that you have a strong enough vinegar content for it to be safe for canning. Okay, so there is the peppercorns, 8 dill heads divided again among 5 pints. And so everything that I have read says that if I'm substituting dill seed, I would want to put in between a half a tablespoon and a tablespoon. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, and I'm probably going a little bit heavy on this, but we like dill, so Okay, so there's the dill. A quarter of a cup of minced garlic cloves, again divided between 5 jars. And we like garlic. I'm going to put about 3/4 of a teaspoon of this minced garlic. That one has a little extra, so we'll get a bonus on that one. Okay, I think I'm putting closer to a teaspoon. Okay. And then the recipe doesn't call for Pickle Crisp, but I'm going to put a rounded 1/8 of a teaspoon of Pickle Crisp in each pint jar. And so this is the Pickle Crisp is totally optional. Let's see, I do have an 1/8 of a teaspoon measure here. So it says I rounded. So rounded 1/8 of a teaspoon of Pickle Crisp. Okay. Okay, now we just need to pack the cucumbers into the jars. I'm going to start off with the spears. Hopefully you guys can see. I know what I'll do. I'll move these two out of the way. And it says to pack them tightly, so I'm going to pack them as tightly as I possibly can. I'm also going to just show you a jar where I put in the slices. I might actually have more cucumbers than I need. We'll see. If I do, what I'll do is I'll just end up making 1 jar of quick pickles. And by the way, this recipe has a 1/2 inch headspace, so you don't want anything to go above the 1/2 inch mark. Okay, so I'm actually kind of excited about this. I'm going to get quite a bit out of here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill up the rest of the jars, and then I will bring you back when I have them filled and I'm ready to put the brine in and get them in the canner. Okay, so I actually ended up with more cucumbers left over than I anticipated. This is how many of the sliced cucumbers I have left. And I also have just a handful of spears. So I might end up just running a second batch, or I might just make all of these quick pickles. I haven't quite decided yet. So anyway, now it's time to put the brine into the jars. So I just took the brine off the stove. It's still hot, and I'm going to use my funnel to help me not make a mess. And again, I'm going for 1/2 inch headspace. I'm not overly concerned when I first put it in because I'm going to debubble, and then I will measure the headspace, check the headspace, and then adjust as needed. Okay, so we'll go ahead and debubble. This one I'm sure I'm going to have to put more in. Okay, I definitely need to put, well, I'll just show you checking with this headspace tool. None of the brine doesn't come up to 1/2 inch on any of them. So I'll definitely be adding a bit more. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and wipe the rims and get the lids on and then put them into the canner. So often when I wipe the rims, I use vinegar, but there's nothing sugary or sticky, nothing greasy with this. So I just have a little bit of water on the paper towel that I'm dipping it into and wiping the rims, making sure there's no little debris, nothing sticking. Also, it's a good time to just check and make sure that there's no chips or anything on the jar lids, or on the rims rather. And the rings fingertip tight as always. Okay, we're just going to put them into the canner. I've got a regular mouth ring underneath one to make it a little easier to lift out. Now, since I'm adding an extra rack to the canner to keep it above the water, it's a little bit, this one's a little high, but it's still fine. So I'm going to close the lid. It is in the exhaust position, and let's go ahead and look at, if I'm remembering right, it's 15 minutes. It says process pint jars for 10 minutes and quart jars for 15 minutes in a boiling water bath. And again, I'm steam canning instead. Now I am going to do 15 minutes because of my altitude, but if you're 1,000 feet or lower, you will do 10 minutes is the processing time. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and punch in the time, and then I'm going to bring you back when it's all over. If you need more details about the exact process for steam canning or water bath canning in the Nesco, then I have separate videos for that you can check out, and that'll go very in-depth. All right, let's go ahead and get the canner started. Okay, I'm pressing water bath steam. I'm going to put in 15 minutes. And again, you would put 10 minutes if you're 1,000 foot or less, and I'm going to press start. So now I'm going to wait for a steady stream of steam. Once that happens, I will press start again, and that's all there is to it. I'll bring you back when everything's finished. Okay, so all of the pickles are now out of the canner. As you know, I put 5 pints into the canner. It looks like they've all sealed. It's too soon for me to actually test the seals. What was interesting is one of them at first looked like it wasn't going to seal, and then now it's kind of the little dimple thing in the middle has gone down, and so I'm happy about that. And I just wanted to mention that's one reason you let them sit undisturbed for at least 12 hours, because sometimes they don't seal immediately and it takes a little bit of time for that process to happen. So it looks like that's what happened. You know, after 12 hours, but before 24 hours, I'll check to make sure they're all tightly sealed. I actually ended up with 2 pints that are that are refrigerator pickles. One is sliced. This one is kind of funny because I have a mixture of spears and slices in it, because that's just the way that it turned out. And so we'll probably eat these first. I think I wanted to let them sit at least 24 hours, maybe a week is really better before I open them. And the canned ones, it's best to let them sit for a good few weeks, month or something for the flavors to really develop. So I will have these to enjoy really as soon as 24 hours if I want to, but I still have some store-bought pickles in the fridge, so I'll probably wait a week or something before I give them a try. And then once I use these up, then I will start into these that are in the pantry. And by the way, my husband, who really wanted the dill relish, he asked if I could turn these into relish. And actually, that's an okay thing to do once they've kind of developed their flavor. What I could do is just take out a small amount and chop them up finely in a food processor or blender or whatever, and then use them just like I would relish. So that's probably what I'll do. and then I don't have to necessarily make relish separately. So that is one thing. If you're not sure, or maybe you just want relish occasionally, you can always take your pickles and chop them up and use them on hot dogs or burgers or whatever else you would want to put relish on. So anyway, I hope that helps, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you would like the video, and if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.